Welcome to this 13th lecture in terms of the IPCC scenarios. Today we are going to discuss on the SSPs. SSP stands for Shared Socio-Economic Pathways. Friends, in this week, in last two lectures, lecture 1, lecture 2, we have already discussed about 3 pathways, I would say 2 plus 2. First one we talked about SRES, but we have made a mention with respect to IS 92. So, this scenario has been given in the year 1992, and then the SRES, that stands for Special Report on Emission Scenario, we discussed in elaboration, where we talked about environment and economic in one side and development and population on the other side, and we discussed with respect to the regional prospects, the global prospect. We discussed A, B, then 1, 2 with respect to A1 and B1, A2 and B2, and we also talked about a fossil scenario with respect to fossil use, non-use and all these things, non-fossil use. With respect to that, we also have a F1 kind of a scenario attached to that. So, in the last class, we discussed about the RCPs, that talks about the representative concentration pathways, stands for RCP, and that is with respect to 2.6, 4.5, 6.0 and 8.5. These are the pathways we discussed. Please note that the previous one it was emission scenario, here it is pathway, and in terms of RCP pathway we discussed this 2.6, 4.5, this amount of energy, what you say, radiative forcing in terms of watts per meter square, and its corroboration to that of the temperature rise and all those things, right. And then today, taking forward, we want to discuss another set of scenarios, a set of pathways called the shared socio-economic pathways, where more often or moreover the policy, the mitigation scenarios or mitigation considerations are added and incorporated on top of the climate change issues. So, moving forward, I would try to take it like this. IS 92, we talked about SRES, we talked about RCPs, and also there we had mention about the ECPs, extended concentration pathways, and this RCP was means we discussed with respect to what could be the scenario by the end of this century, 21st century, 2100. Extended talks about another 200 years, and in today's talk, we are going to discuss, in today's lecture, we are going to discuss about the next one, that is the shared socio-economic pathways. And as you can see, as you can guess from the name nomenclature itself, that there is some shared socio-economic, some socio-economic aspect has been considered, the economic aspect has been considered, the mitigation aspect has been considered. So, let us see what it is. So, to learn this, we will have these 5 concepts. To understand this, we will have these 5 concepts we have to cover. So, what we are going to cover are the SSP development process and the characteristics. So, how this SSP development process has happened and what are the basic characteristics of this. The second is the quantification. In terms of the quantification, we will talk about the demographic and the economic, particularly the GDP and the population growth, and then we will move on to some linkage and some model based outputs in terms of understanding in comparison of understanding of the SSP pathways or SSP pathways based outputs in comparison to the SSP and in comparison to the RCPs and the SRES scenarios. So, this will give us a clear understanding that how by considering or integrating the socio-economic aspect, we also compare and contrast the previous two in terms of the RCPs and the SRES and know how is the deviation, how is the change, how is the match or mismatch. And then we are going to talk about the baseline scenario and its comparison in terms of the energetic system or energy system, the use of different fuels, fossil fuel, different sources of energy as we know, renewable and non-renewable. Then we will try to understand the mitigation challenges and particularly the cost factor attached to that. That will give us an indication that why the withdrawal of or the control or the mitigation is much cheaper or much more what you say needed now than in a future year, because every year when we are getting loaded with more and more greenhouse gases and other things, then the situation is becoming different or difficult, or we do not know what it is a different scenario, and accordingly the cost factor might vary. So, let us talk about that. To begin with, we will have the development processes and look at these 5 main steps. The first one is develop the SSP narratives and the logic around that. So, what are the narratives? Let us look at the left hand side figure also parallelly and convert the narratives into qualitative input assumptions. So, what are the narratives and how they have been converted into the assumptions, and that led to quantification in terms of demographic and the economic drivers, and also the energy aspect, the land use land cover scenario, the other emission scenario, all these things have been modeled in terms of an integrated assessment models. Then we will also understand the generation of this SSP baseline and various mitigation scenarios. So, let us see with respect to this particular figure the SSP scenario drivers. We consider in this the population, the urbanization effect. So, friends, understand the moment we talk about population, many things are linked to that. When you talk about urbanization effect, many things are linked to that. The GDP, economic prospect, things are linked. So, GDP, education, urbanization, everything has been linked, and these narratives will now be converted into some qualitative input assumptions. So, what are they? In terms of this, the baseline and the mitigation scenarios. So, 6 integrated assessment models output have been considered, or integrated assessment model what you say feedback has been considered, and then 5 marker scenario we are going to see next. The SSP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 have been named as 5 marker scenarios, and then apart from that we have 19 non-marker scenarios that depicts the various uncertainties. So, let us see. So, here in contrast to the previous things like SRES and RCPs, we are incorporating 19 non-marker scenario that considers the uncertainties. So, we will also know how much, we will also get an idea about the certainties and uncertainties. So, this is in that way deviates from that of the RCPs and SRES. Now, in terms of the mitigation, friends, there is a simple difference between the adaptation and mitigation. All of us know adaptation we tolerate, we adjust to a changing situation. Mitigation we deal with that, So, now you can see we are having winter here when this is being recorded in Kharagpur. So, since if the temperature, the minimum temperature is around 15, 16, 17, we say that okay, we can adapt, we can adjust to that. But below that, you need certain things to mitigate it. So, that is why you wear a blazer, you wear a sweater. So, that is the difference between that. So, what are the mitigation scenario in terms of the SRES in terms of the SSP or shared socio-economic pathway based projections, BASED based projections. So, first is the shared policy assumptions, second is 4 long term radiative forcing targets, third is 81 mitigation scenarios, and fourth is assessment of costs and the feasibility. So, few model names have been put there. So, what we understand from this basic slide to the beginning in terms of the SSP understanding is we have a narratives. The narratives is it takes inputs from the population, urbanization and gross domestic product GDP, then forms a baseline scenarios, as you know, 6 integrated assessment models IMs, 5 marker scenarios and 19 non-marker scenarios that talks about the uncertainties. And then we also have another output kind of scenarios that talks about, or that is the mitigation, where what are the various mitigation in terms of the policy, in terms of the other things, cost, accountability, everything are included. So, the IM inputs for 5 different regions includes energy supply and demand, land use and land cover change, greenhouse gas emission, air pollution and aerosol emissions, mitigation cost, prices, etc. So, everything has been taken in terms of integrated assessment models, and then we come out with we develop the SSP scenarios, and based on that we come out in terms of the baseline scenario and the mitigation scenario. Now, friends, let us look at those individual markers. We call it SSP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in detail. So, in terms of, I have already written it very clearly. So, the first one is SSP 1, that is sustainability. So, taking the green road, low challenges to mitigation and adaptation. The world shifts gradually but pervasively towards a more sustainable path. Remember, it is the if with the SSP 1, which is also indication of the sustainability scenario. So, here we assume, or this set of pathway, because P stands for pathway, this set of pathway talks about that it indicates that the world is moving or shifting gradually and towards a more sustainable path. That means, it emphasizes more in terms of the inclusive development that respect perceived environmental boundaries. So, management of the global commons slowly improves, educational and health investments accelerate the development or demographic transition, and the emphasis on the economic growth shifts towards a broader emphasis on human well-being. I will not read out everything, it is there on the slide. So, please go through in detail, but I will focus on the important point what they exactly mean. So, SSP 2. SSP 2 is the middle of the road. So, this pathway is framed and it actually indicates a kind of middle of the road pathway. So, in this the world follows a path in which social, economic and technological trends, look at the third term, the technological trends do not shift markedly from the historical pattern. So, we are not expecting a very high level shift, that means medium challenges to mitigation and adaptation. So, in this pathway or in the second pathway SSP 2, which talks about the middle of road kind of indication. So, here the development and income growth proceeds unevenly, with some countries making relatively good progress, while others fall short of expectation. The global and national institutions work together, but make slow progress in achieving sustainable development goals. So, this is the main characteristics of the SSP 2, the middle of the road scenario. Now, friends, let us move on to the third, which has a indication in terms of the regional rivalry. So, it is a rocky road, not a kind of smooth road. So, that means rocky road means it includes high challenges to mitigation and adaptation. So, a resurgent nationalism, concerns about competitiveness and security, and regional conflicts push countries to increasingly focus on domestic or at most regional issues. So, this considers a different set of scenario in terms of the resurgent nationalism, the competitiveness, the security, the regional conflicts. You see, one war is going on more than 3 years between two countries, and there are various other countries as taking side of one or the other. What do you say, proxy wars are the wars in which has a background in terms of the political goals are going on. So, what happens in this way? The policies shift over time to become increasingly oriented towards national and regional security issues. So, policy shift happens. Countries focus on achieving energy and food security goals within their own regions at the expense of broad based development. So, that means investment in education and technological development decline, economic development is very slow, consumption is material intensive, and inequalities persist or worsen over time. So, look at this, it talks about the SSP3, which includes the regional rivalry factor in details. Now, let us move on to the fourth one, that is the SSP4 or inequality. So, it talks about, or it has indication in terms of a divided road. So, low challenges to mitigation, high challenges to adaptation. Okay. So, very low challenge to mitigation, high challenge to adaptation or adjustment, right. So, in this we maintain or we have an indication in terms of inequalities. High unequal investments in human capital combined with increasing disparities in economic opportunity and political power lead to increasing inequalities and stratification both across and within countries. Over a time, this gap it widens between an internationally connected society that contributes to knowledge and a capital intensive sector of the global economy and a fragmented collection of low income, poorly educated society that work in a labor intensive and a low tech economy way. So, that means the social cohesion degrades and conflict and unrest become increasingly common. Technology development is high in the high tech economic sectors. So, environmental policies focus on local issues around middle and high income areas. So, this is an indication of very divided road, because you have a very high level of disparity or inequalities leading to low challenge to mitigation, but high challenge to the adaptation or adjustment. Similarly, the last one, the fifth one, SSP5, which is a fossil fuel development. So, taking a very high way, that means high challenge to mitigation and very low challenge to adaptation. You have very low challenge to adjustment kind of thing, which you put under adaptation. This world places increasing faith in competitive markets, innovation and participatory societies to produce rapid technological progress and development of human capital as the path to sustainable development. That is the main characteristics. You take the development of human capital as the path to sustainable development. Global markets are increasingly integrated. There are strong investment in health, education, institution to enhance the human and social capital. So, this kind of pathway is leading to fossil fuel developments. So, all these factors lead to rapid growth of global economy, while global population peaks and declines in the year 21st century. So, here the local environmental problems such as air pollution, they are successfully managed. There is faith in the ability of the effectively manage social and ecological systems, including the geoengineering in age if it is necessary. Now, let us see, after understanding these 5 pathways in terms of SSP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 1 talks about the sustainability, 2 talks about the middle of the road, 3 talks about the regional rivalry, 4th talks about the inequality, and 5th talks about the fossil fuel development. Having understood their characteristics or basic difference in terms of their characteristics, let us try to see the quantification. Friends, on the left hand side, to just try to understand, on the left hand side we have put 4 different curves. The A, first one stands for population and education, B, urbanization, C stands for the GDP, gross domestic product, and D stands for the GDP per capita. Okay. So, as you recall in our second slide, the third slide we talked about population, urbanization and GDP, and based on that we take this into our consideration. So, you see on the first one, population and education. The first one, the y axis is represented in terms of the million and x axis talks about the year, and the range of this, the how do you read these kind of IPCC based or model based outputs? You try to get an idea that broadly it talks about there is an increase in terms of the population and also the education by end of 21st century. So, population will increase, also educated population will increase. So, it means educated population, right. And then various kinds of graphs, the colors are indicated here. Let us say SSP 1 is represented by this magenta line or curve, whereas the SSP 1 is by the dark green color curve and the red one is by SSP 3. So, and if you look at the other major studies, this a kind of yellow wash, okay, the yellow wash is here. The yellow wash region talks about the SRES scenarios, and these hatched regions, they are with respect to the AR5 working group 2 scenarios, and the other things are coming from different publications or groups, and UN urbanization trend B is also to 2050. So, these are the depictions and colors represent that. So, now what we understand from these kind of depictions are the graphs. The first point we understand that yes, there is simply in terms of the when we move from, now we are in 2026, when we move towards 2100 after at the end of another 74 years, the population and the educated population will increase, but that increase, whatever projection we are seeing here based on the scenarios, the increase is uncertain. Okay. Few this SSP saying this after certain time it will again decrease. The red one SSP 3 also saying that after certain years it will decrease. The orange one also, which talks about the SSP 4, says that after certain period it decreases, and then the red is the SSP 3 that says that yes, it will go on increasing by till end of 2100, and the wash areas, this particularly yellow wash regions, talks about the range which is given by SRES. Okay. So, one is the SSP, these lines, and comparison to SRES based range based things. SRES you all understood now, you remember, environmental economic based. So, there we have not incorporated the policy or the demography or the socio-economic aspects. Here we are incorporating the policy, demography and all those things. Now, friends, here in this way you try to understand and try to see that how the SSP and the other emission scenario based outputs helps you in understanding that if we follow this set of conditions or this set of criteria, then our future will be like this. So, you pre-inform, okay, you get a pre-information, so that you change your policy, you change your other things to deal with or to attend or to match with the target what you want. So, similarly others like population, the GDP here, and more importantly the GDP per capita is here. So, look, this inset, two inset figures, we are not going in detail. This one is up to more than 15 years old education, and this is something else in terms of Guinea. So, we are not talking here. So, we are only talking about the GDP per capita. You see, all these SSP based scenarios, they say all of them, they say that there will be increase in GDP per capita, whereas this red one SSP 3 says the increase is very mild, whereas the SSP 5 says, which is a very development or highway path, it says that the increase in GDP will be very high by the end of 21st century. And then you can understand from the correspondence between the scenarios and the pathway kind of linkage and line up. Look at the second column, do not worry about this C1, C2, these kind of different categories, and look at this, the SSP1 equivalent to 1.9 in terms of watts per meter square if you compare with the RCP. RCP, you know, the four frames we have talked with respect to 2.6, 4.5, 6.0 and 8.5. Here corroborative what you say warming could be or radiative forcing could be with respect to 1.9, 2.6, 4.5, 7.0 and 8.5. Okay. So, straight away 1, 2, 3 and 8.5. So, very low and this in terms of the carbon. And another thing I want to introduce here with respect to the net zero. Friends, all of us understand the buzzword which is net zero. What does it mean? The meaning is very simple, friends. If it is the concept is whatever we are emitting, whatever as a human being we are emitting to the earth in terms of gaseous compositions or dominantly the greenhouse gas composition, we must take them back from the atmosphere. That is the important point, and that is why it is net emission to the atmosphere is 0. So, we cannot say that we will not emit. We cannot do that. We cannot stop development. We cannot stop living. But we should also say that the net what we are emitting should be 0. That means whatever we are throwing, we should take it back. Whatever through our industrial emission, whatever through our urban activities or travel activity, transport activities, whatever we are emitting to the atmosphere should be taken back. That is the concept of net zero. So, different countries have different commitments. Somewhere we try to achieve net zero by 2050, by 2070, by 2100 and things like that. So, accordingly the corroboration, if we follow this path and having this kind of radiative forcing, having this kind of carbon emission, then the net zero can be achieved by the year 2050, 2070 or by end of this century. So, here you can see the limit in terms of the warming. So, warming is actually given in terms of the degree centigrade, which is again compared to that of the average of 1850 to 1900, and that is how you see this 1.5, 2 degree, 2.5 degree, 3 degree, 4 degree kind of exceeded warming or limited warming in comparison to the baseline. Okay. So, the greenhouse gas emission scenarios, and you have the 1.9 and all these things I have mentioned it here, and corroborative the RCP pathway there. Friends, let us look at the energy system. In this diagram, I want to explain you to make you realize the energy demand which is high to low. So, look at this all this triangle, okay, and the scenarios here with respect to SSP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 coming from different model runs, and primary energy triangle is here, where this end represent oil and gas, this end represents the renewable nuclear energy. Here this one represent the coal, which is more of a fossil fuel. So, fossil fuel, this is also fossil fuel, these are renewable energy and nuclear energy, these are very clean and green energy, right. So, in this situation, where and how this would look like in various scenarios or various pathways. Similarly, we have discussed in the last class as far as RCP is concerned, and today also we are putting this different pathways in terms of the shared socioeconomic pathways SSP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here, and this itself you can try to understand in terms of the SSP baseline scenario as far as the energy system is concerned. So, this is due to changing the core drivers of the energy system. If you are going for energy mix scenario like SSP 3 and 5, so dominant, that is coal and fossil fuel, high mitigation challenge. In terms of SSP 1 and 4, dominantly renewable and low carbon, you have low challenge. Similarly, for SSP 2, dominantly balanced fossil, that means mixed renewable energy, which has medium challenge. So, energy demand high to low moves in terms of SSP 5, then little lower is for SSP 3 and 4 kind of pathways, and then SSP 2 followed by SSP 1, where your energy demand is extremely low. Now, friends, we are talking about the mitigation challenges. So, we have two options in hand. Forest, the forest are the very important, or whatever the green material. Why it is? Because they withdraw the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere by the process of photosynthesis, which we all know. So, forest expansion is one of the very cheap, green and safe way of mitigation, and the second one is the CCS deployment. We have not yet discussed about CCS. CCS stands for the the carbon capture, utilization and storage, CCUS sometime, or just CCS for carbon capture storage, where U remains silent, but utilization component. So, friends, so you see the major mitigation options are written here, where on y axis the share of low carbon, and the x axis you have baseline scenario and mitigation scenario as far as the upscaling of the low carbon energy, and in the middle one, lower middle, you have the forest expansion, where mitigation depends on the SSP baseline. And the pathway, in terms of the path dependency of mitigation, you can see based on the scenarios as far as the different solar the radiative forcing is concerned, and comparatively the SSP 5 markers are concerned. So, they have been put forth here to understand the path dependency in terms of the mitigations. Friends, this kind of analysis informs us to readjust ourselves so as to achieve something called net zero. And coming to the cost, the mitigation cost and attainability. You can see in the x axis, it is the cost factor, in term it is the pathways SSP 1, 4, 2, 3 and 5, and the y axis represented the forcing or radiative forcing in terms of watts per meter square, starting from 2 to 8.5. And we have on the right hand side the legend or the indicator bar, that is the in terms of the price in dollar. So, the carbon price for 2.6 watts per meter square in terms of mitigation for SSP 1 scenario is 9 tons per carbon dioxide to be removed, whereas in case of SSP based pathways, it could be 25 tons of carbon dioxide. So, that is what we want to say, that it is always good to act, because act early, so that the mitigation cost is cheaper than in a later scenario. So, this helps in terms of understanding the mitigation cost, and we will elaborate more on this when we will talk in our latter weeks in terms of I think 8th or 9th week we are going to talk in terms of the carbon finance. So, there things will be more clear to us how it is calculated. This is just an indication. The indication and the take home message from here is, yes, if we have different scenario based estimates in terms of the cost, and it is good to act early because that is the cheapest. So, for this we have taken reference of these two literature. They are all the published literature available in the public domain. And to conclude, these are the 5 points we discussed. SSPs link narratives to demographic, economic and energy system modeling. The integrated assessment models generate baseline and mitigation pathways under different development futures. SSP 1 enables early net zero, while SSP 3, 5 face the hardest decarbonization. SSP 1 you remember that is in more what you say corroborative as far as the sustainability pathway is concerned. So, energy mix and demand patterns determine mitigation difficulty and CCS dependence. So, more of this in terms of the CCS we will talk in some other class. So, you must understand the CCS is the technological way of carbon or carbon equivalent removal from the atmosphere or from any system, whereas the other mitigation measure, the cheapest as we discussed, is the vegetation or the forest waste, growing extra forest or more forest or the more greeneries. Policy consistent pathways shape costs and long term adaptation. Friends, to achieve any kind of situation, any kind of target, it has to be sustainable, including the cost and the long term sustainability. So, let us continue our discussion. In the next class, we are going to see, using these scenarios, what is going to happen in terms of the temperature or the temperature rise. Thank you very much for your patience listening. See you soon back.